Hey everybody, it is Patrick McLain. We are continuing the Halloween edition of Reimagine 2020. This is version 4. I was just talking to the guests that we're about to have about that timeline. If you would have asked our team in May, it was just like create this first event, and now we might actually get to one each month this year. And it's cool when you can see, I think, trail a conversation, right? Like you can have some conversations one off, but then you can, if you actually keep track of what was said, what were the results, right? How did things evolve? I think it always adds a little extra value. So before I go on too long, Mark Yusko, I'm gonna call him Mark, the sombrero Yusko, and also the first guest I've had who was he didn't even hesitate. He was like, "You got a Mario hat? It's Halloween. I got one." So I love this guy. Mark, how you doing?
Doing great. And thanks for having me on the Tales of the Crypto version of Reimagine as we get ready for Halloween. And, it's funny, you inspired me with your Mario hat. So, since the lockdown started, my son and I have been playing Pokemon Go. So, he plays on his Nintendo Switch. He plays a lot of Mario related stuff. But I have gotten into Pokemon Go with him. And so we've been out on our adventure, and I'm feeling a little Ludicolo-ish with my sombrero on today. So that's who I'll be channeling for our conversation.
I want to say so many things about that, but you're just too awesome. So, hey, there's a few things I want to talk about, right? And I think my conversation with you is unique because we've done this a few times. Out of 4 events, you've been on 3. Thank you for the support. The only one you weren't on was last one, which you kind of hit on DeFi. So just really focus on that and really had a very specific theme. Probably still should have had you on that one. But
yeah, I'm kind of hurt. I'm actually kind of hurt, so I actually have a lot to say about DeFi too, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I apologize for that one.
It's all right.
But first off, you went on a trip. So last time I talked to you, you were just starting or kind of landing at the end of a trip. I feel like you kind of had some eye-opening experiences there. Congratulations, new granddaughter. But do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I do. Look, we made this decision. So my daughter was going to have a baby first week of September, and my wife said, "Oh, I don't really want to fly because she's worried about the virus." I'm like, "Well, we're probably safer on the plane than other places." Long story, we decided to drive. So we live in North Carolina. We packed up with the dog and our youngest 9-year-old, and we made it an adventure. So we went on a 6-week trip, coast to coast, back and forth, and we stopped in 14 states along that trip. And the most eye-opening part, other than welcoming the new grandbaby, was just the pain and suffering that's going on in the country, and all this discussion of some big recovery. Not on Main Street. Wall Street, definite recovery. The liquidity has flowed into financial assets and other scarce assets, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But the reality is we went through towns where homelessness was just a massive problem. Place like Nashville, where you wouldn't expect there to be homelessness. Santa Fe, New Mexico, just 1 out of 3 businesses shut down. The vendors we talked to, the storekeepers we talked to, talking about having to shut down because they tried, because no one is traveling. No one's going there. Grand Canyon, expected big crowds. No one there. There were 2 people at the lodge we stayed at. Got to California, again, big homelessness problem. They've had a homelessness problem for a long time. I think partly weather, but Venice Beach just overrun with tent cities. Come back through Texas. The one place that was kind of getting back to normal, Austin, Texas. It was a Friday night. Bars were open. It took us, a long time to get a restaurant. So that was a little heartening. But again, homeless problem. Oh my gosh, just between the hotel door and Starbucks, 1 block, basically accosted 4 different times, aggressively, people stand up, get in your way, not the typical kind of panhandler, can you help me out? So I just think there's a lot of pain and suffering that's been caused by this irrational response of governments to this virus threat. And look, we've been dealing with viruses as a human race for hundreds, actually thousands of years, and we've never shut down society. And I think the implications of that and the ramifications of that are just being felt. And so all the talk about a recovery, all the talk about job creation, it's just nonsense, right? If 55 million people, actually now it's more like 68 million people, go out of work, and then 55 go back to work, that's a net destruction of 13 million jobs. So all the talk about, oh, we're the greatest job creation administration in history, just not true. So there's a lot of pain going on, and I think it has big implications for monetary policy, fiscal policy, and even bigger implications for cryptocurrencies, which is what Reimagine is all about.
Well, you're beating me to my next part because I would like a Mark Yusko State of the Union in a second. But before I get to these other topics, I think people might enjoy listening to. But before we go there, you got to tell me, and that granddaughter might just be best part of the trip by default. That has to be number one.
Yeah.
So maybe what was a highlight from the trip? What was one thing that what was your best part about it?
Easy. Grand Canyon. How I waited 57 years to go to the Grand Canyon, I will never know. Now, I've flown over it hundreds of times and thought, oh yeah, big hole in the ground. It is a spectacular place. And I wish I would have stayed longer. I wish I could have hiked down to the bottom, camped out. We will do that at some point. I mean, it was absolutely stunning. And again, I don't know why I never thought it would be cool, but it's really cool. So that was, other than, again, welcoming the grandbaby, that was definitely the highlight. But there were a couple other highlights along the way. The realization that work from anywhere works. I mean, I worked from hotel rooms. I worked from my in-laws' house in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I worked from an Airbnb in Santa Monica. I was 2 blocks from Starbucks and 6 blocks from the beach. It was almost perfect, actually, and a couple of blocks from my grandbaby. Although the good news, the big realization is my son-in-law, daughter, and the 2 babies are moving to North Carolina this weekend because, again, work from anywhere. His firm sold to, he's an asset management business, sold to a firm in London. The boss said, hey, I'm going to live in Switzerland. The rest of you can live wherever you want because we're not going to have an office anymore, not have a physical office. And so daughter raised her hand and said, we're going to North Carolina to be near family. And awesome for us. But really this work from anywhere, I mean, you're a perfect example. You're sitting in Thailand as we speak, and you can work from anywhere. And that has huge implications for certain industries, for certain communities. There's going to be a mass exodus of people from urban centers to more remote areas where cost of living is better, quality of life is better. And we'll eventually get to talking about this, but one of the cool things, again, you have a lot of contemplative time when you're driving for that many hours. And one of the things that I really thought deeply about is this idea that we are moving to a time of amazing abundance and amazing opportunity. People are like, what are you talking about? The world shut down. I'm like, yeah, there was this irrational response to the virus, but that is pulled forward all of these digital trends that, again, Reimagine has been talking about all year, but these digital trends that were 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the future are happening in real time. And as those accelerate, that's going to free up time for creativity, for innovation, ultimately wealth creation. And we're going to empower generations of people to be digital natives and to embrace this movement to digital assets, digital businesses. And it's really awesome. I mean, I can't even tell you how awesome it's going to be. But you got to come from a place of darkness where we are today to get to that point.
I think that's what's interesting about history, are probably things that may or may not have correlation or that we don't identify. Sometimes we can see them in that same time span. Sometimes we have to review them many years later. But all right, before you take my whole next point away, I want the Mark Yusko State of the Union. So I've been listening to you. I heard you in May. I think we were looking at the beginning of the coronavirus. I think you kind of were probably ahead of being outspoken and the response and the long-term effects you think it would have.
Yep.
I think I had the chance to talk to you in August and kind of understanding monetary policy. I think what was propping the markets back up. I'd watched a short clip of you the other day on, I think on CNBC or something, and you immediately jumped on, and maybe like one of your predictions wasn't right, and you were like, "Hey, let me just stop you guys there and admit where maybe I got something wrong." Respect for
Yep.
that. And
Yep.
now we're at the end of October. So, can you tell me where have you been? What has surprised you? What do you think you got wrong? What do you think is still to come? I think when we look to the rest of this year.
Yeah, look, so in order of question. So first, State of the Union. The State of the Union is the world is in a bad place from a productivity perspective, from a trade perspective, and this movement from globalization and an outward collaborative spirit to an inward focused nationalistic non-global world is a horrific development. That is a bad thing, and it's been bad every time it's happened in history. The last time was really in the 1930s. We are reliving the 1930s almost, play by play, and that's bad. So the overall state of play is really not very good. And if you look at economic growth, it's bad. If you look at the ability for places to recover, it's bad. Now, the flip side of that is the government responses, the central bank responses, and the fiscal responses have been extreme. And what I got wrong, right? I mean, never in my wildest dreams could I imagine a complete discarding of traditional economic theory for this idea that you can print money out of thin air, put it in the economy, and create wealth, right? If that were true, wouldn't every country have done that over the course of history? Oh, wait, they tried. And in every case in history, every single one, every one of those empires that became overly indebted, that became very nationalistic and tried to bail out themselves out of debt by devaluing their currency, ended up erased, right? It was the end of the empire. And oh, by the way, you never want to be called an empire because all empires fall, right? No matter it was the Roman, the Ottoman, the British, the American, every empire falls, and the American empire is falling as we speak. I mean, we're kind of a global embarrassment, horrible leadership, huge debt problems. And it's not just the US, right? It's Western economies. And that's partly not their fault in the sense that the biggest reason behind where we are is bad demographics. Every day, 10,000 people turn 65 in the US and Europe. Japan's already there. We have too many old people, which means lack of productivity, burden on society. I don't mean burden in the sense of a bad thing. I mean, they're very nice people. And, I have parents who are in their 80s. It's not that they're not good people. It's just that they're not productive. They don't produce things, and therefore they're a drain on system resources. And so where we are is in this deflationary death spiral, and you're seeing that everywhere, right? The only response the governments know how to apply today is to increase the supply of fiat currencies. And one thing we know is real money, whether that be gold or silver or other stores of value, fine art, collectibles, scarce real estate, and ultimately crypto assets, particularly scarce crypto assets like Bitcoin, will appreciate in value. And so we're seeing a massive sea change in wealth transfer. So the wealth right now is going to the very tippy top, right? The 0.1%. And we have the greatest income and wealth inequality in the history of the world. Now, we also have the highest number of people out of poverty in the world. So that's the awesome thing. We've taken almost 1 billion people out of abject poverty over the last 30 years, put them in the middle class. That's awesome.
And when you saying weave, you're saying Western culture.
Western world, and include China in there. I mean, China is really responsible for about 3/4 of that. But whether it's China, whether it's India, whether it's the Western world, and it's really, when I say we there, I'm talking about the world, the globe has moved a lot of people out of poverty. But the real problem is in the Western societies, we've concentrated all of that wealth in the top 0.1%. And that ultimately is a bad thing. And that ultimately leads to downfall. And that's why, Japan has struggled been moribund in terms of growth for years. Why Europe is struggling. Look at European bank stocks, for example, right? When you go to negative interest rates, the banking industry ceases to function. So what happens to the value of those securities? They go down.
Well, I have a question. In your state, in the State of the Union, right, is that we can identify problems, right? We can maybe ask people, were you better off 4 years ago or 20 years ago, right? I don't know how long they've been tracking it. I think if we look at 2008, we look at like other landmarks, at least the ones that I've seen, the issues were a bit more clear. Like banks took us down, or these like bundled mortgages, or whatever people were sold from a media perspective, like they had a target of an enemy. Do you feel like right now people are, especially I think what happened in the last, call it 6 to 9 months, because I think a lot happened that people don't get. I feel like there's still a big disconnect. Do you think that people are outraged as they should be right now, or that because this is kind of bundled with a pandemic, that there is they've dropped their guard in regards to who they're blaming? Like,
Absolutely. The pandemic's the excuse, right? The problem we have has been manifesting for a long time. And that is this concentration of wealth at the top, crony capitalism. People are saying, oh, this is a failure of capitalism. No, it's not. It's a corruption of capitalism. Capitalism disappeared years ago, and it's been getting worse and worse in terms of cronyism and basically buying things. I mean, I never thought I would live to see the day where in America, we'd be talking about buying votes, literally talking about giving people free money in exchange for their vote. That happens in Venezuela. That happens in Argentina. That happens in Zimbabwe. That happens in third world countries, not first world countries. Well, now it's happening in a first world country. We're seeing it live. And so, again, that's why my State of the Union, whether it be the American Union or the global union, is pretty bad. Now, that's the negative side. On the positive side, all the things we talked about earlier are wildly positive. The potential upside as we transition leadership from, our generation, the boomer generation, to the millennial generation, who are much more, I think, pragmatic and much more civic minded. Don't have this me kind of, someone said to me one time, what is an entitlement? An entitlement is a promise that you make to yourself that you don't fund in advance and you ask your kids to pay for. Well, who the hell wouldn't vote for that? That's awesome. So us boomers have created all these entitlement programs to basically pay for our lap of luxury in retirement, but we didn't fund them. So we didn't do what, the government of Singapore did and create an investment arm that would take the money that was set aside for Social Security and invest it in some of the best businesses in the world and create incredible value and wealth. We have a pay-as-you-go system. It's not even an insurance company system where you set aside premiums, invest them, and then pay out claims later. We just rob Peter to pay Paul. So I look at it all and come back to this basic view that the pandemic is an excuse, I'll argue perhaps even a created excuse, to justify going off the rails in economic theory, to embrace this idea of MMT, to embrace this idea that, we can print as much money as we want and force it into the system. And if you think about that, what does that mean? Well, if you have $1 million sitting on the desk and I have $1 million sitting on the desk, we have $2 million total. Well, if a government goes and prints another 2 million, what just happened to the value of our $1 million each? Just got cut in half. And so you're seeing that in the cost of things that people use. And so when currencies get devalued, right, that's bad for the average person, particularly the average person who lives on a fixed income or on a minimum wage. The people who benefit are the people whose assets go up nominally. And that's the key. We have this nominal inflation of assets, whether it be stocks or real estate or collectibles, and you feel wealthier. But here's the thing. If you denominate the asset in the right currency, you're worse off. think about stocks. Stocks over the last 2 years, right? Since I'll say this crisis started in January of 2018, if you look at that, stocks are about 15, 18%. It's not horrible, not great, but not bad. If you denominate in dollars, oh, but let's denominate in gold. Oh, well, now you're down 44%. What if you denominate in Bitcoin? Ooh, now it's even uglier. So what's happening is real money, sound money, like gold, like Bitcoin, digital gold, are increasing in their purchasing power, while fiat currency is destroyed by the creation of too many. And that's the myth that people have bought into, is that, oh, government, please bail us out. Oh, government, give me more free money. Oh, government. There's never been a time in history where government spending led to growth and prosperity. It just doesn't happen because it crowds out private business. Private business, small business in particular, like those businesses in Santa Fe, the ones that are going out of business are, destroying jobs, right? The airlines now laying people off now that they're past their COVID window where they got their bailout money. They're laying people off. And all of that is negative. And what we need are policies that move the emphasis on job creation and small business formation, not the opposite. We don't want to favor big business. We want to favor small business. We don't want to concentrate the assets in the hands of the few. We want to concentrate but we don't want to give it to people. We want to create incentives for innovation, business development, and wealth creation.
Is it safe to say that you're worried?
Safe to say that I'm worried, yes. In fact, we've had conversations.
If you were to go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say we've had conversations around my house about some of the policies that are coming out of the rhetoric around the election in the U.S. And my wife's like, "Well, what are we going to do?" I'm like, "We're moving to Bali." And so I told you I'm going to call you to find out where to go. But I'm only semi joking. I mean, it is bad. Now, I'm not a.
And let me glue this part together. I mean, I actually had a note here, and I was gonna skip over it, but I mean, I think you're actually kind of bringing some of my logic is like if there's games being played, and I say, what can people do about it, right? And they would start and say, okay, what's the root cause?
Mm-hmm.
Do you define politicians? And I guess you probably take a heavily U.S. view. I do as well, being from there, right? So I tend to kind of anchor my beliefs there, right? Yeah. And I think maybe we can kind of anchor the dollar in some way to world markets also.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a political issue, and is there any way to stop it, do you think, at this point?
Look, well, there are some ways to stop it. I mean, term limits would help. Go back to the original model where it was not a career. Think about it. If it cost $100 million to win a Senate seat, not very many people have $100 million. So where do they get it? From businesses. Well, what do people expect if they give you $100 million? Favors. So right now we have a corrupt system that is based on cronyism rather than how it was originally thought of, where it was a 2-year service, right? It was like selective service or military service in Israel. It was a couple years. It was mandatory, not mandatory, but it was a voluntary thing. And you didn't, make it a career, and you didn't expect to get rich being a politician. And so I think term limits would certainly help. The second thing would to get rid of the black money, get rid of the dark money. I mean, we've actually gone the opposite way. I mean, I remember all the talk in 2016 about drain the swamp. Whew. No, we actually put up monster dikes around the swamp and filled it up even bigger with more, bad money. And so that bad money has high expectations.
What's modulation? I know I'm saying it wrong. When you can't sell something as a president or make money as a president, amalgamation.
Oh yeah, emollients clause. Yeah.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be allowed to own hotels where you force people to stay when they come visit.
Everything got thrown out the window.
Yeah, or you shouldn't be able to go on a golf trip with the Secret Service and have them pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to your golf club. But yeah, the emollients clause has been abused. But in the old days, we actually had rules, right? people would have to sell off their assets or put them in a blind trust. Those rules have just been wiped out. And it's not just the president, right? We have senators that own securities where they can pass legislation that favors those companies. And when asked about it, they say, oh, well, that's just part of our compensation. You know, you can't be convicted of insider trading if you're a congressman or senator. You and I could be convicted of insider trading. Well, why not them? I don't know, because they passed a law that said they're immune. So all of these things go to this fundamental problem, which is, look, everyone focuses on the president. It's really not the president, it's the Congress, right? Congress passes the laws. Presidents are kind of figureheads. And yes, they set the tone. And I think our tone today is horrific, right? We have a tone that, you know, says it's okay to lie, says it's okay to be unfaithful, not trustworthy, you know, all the things that I think are good, like character and trust. Those have just been gone, you know, just are gone. And when people see that at the top, they emulate that behavior. So we have lots of people emulating behaviors that are just horrific. Look at all the race relation deterioration. So all this comes down to a fact that, you know, every system that gets overly indebted will become more government reliant and will eventually go down what I call the dictator playbook, which is you impoverish as many people as possible through policy. Then you make them dependent on you by giving them handouts, whether it's subsidized electricity in Argentina or whether that's $1,200 of stimulus checks during COVID. Once you make people dependent on you, guess what? They'll vote for you. And then you create this very terrible kind of almost addict environment where you got the pusher on one side and you got the addict on the other. And we know how that story ends on Skid Row. And that's why I said on my trip, I saw all these tent cities. And it's not just drugs, right? It's healthcare costs. It's, you know, how is it possible that companies that do nothing but process claims can have tens of billions of dollars of market cap? Well, they paid for it, right? There's actually a great, Strategas has this thing called the lobbying index.
As I say, everything that doesn't make sense, I live in the States, is lobbying. It comes back. You can find
says lobbying.
most obscure.
And they have this thing called the lobbying index. The companies that pay the most in lobbying every year outperform all the other companies. Again, that's corruption, but we tolerate it for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. But I think part of it is we get numb to it, right? You know, we sit in this polarized world with social media. So we're either right or we're left. And I always joke, forget about it. There's no right or left. There's no Republicans or Democrats. There's in and out. There's in power and out of power. And once you're in power, right, we have a president who used to be a Democrat, who now claims to be a Republican, but he's neither one, right? And we've had presidents before who flipped. You know, Ronald Reagan flipped. I mean, all kinds of people flipped. It's in. You just want to get in power. And once you're in, you do or say whatever it takes to stay in. And when you're out, you do or say whatever it takes to get in, because in is better than out.
Do you think what happens in the next few weeks in U.S. politics is going to have much of an impact one way or another?
Nope. Okay. Because again, I don't think it's the president that really matters. I think it's Congress. Now, look, if we get a blue wave and we get a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic Congress, that sucks. Because it's never been good for markets to have one party control everything, because they do what politicians do. They do the wrong thing because they're incented to do that because of the money. And checks and balances exist for a reason. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, the framers, you know, some of them were not really nice people if you go back in history, but they were really smart. I mean, the way they set up the government with the three branches, with the checks and balances within each branch, with systems, and we've dismantled so many of those things over the past few decades. That's pretty horrifying. But at the end, that basic framed structure is really good. So I do think there's a self-leveling mechanism. So if we get a total blue wave, the next 2 years could be pretty nasty, because we'll go way too far left. And I don't mean left like left and right. I just mean we'll go to this idea that spending money that we don't have is a good idea, and that giving people money is a good idea, and that subsidizing certain industries over others is a good idea. None of which have historically been good ideas, but I think we'll go too far that way. If we get more of a balance, I think it'll be okay, and there won't be much impact. The bigger problem is not the election. The bigger problem is the global response to the pandemic, which continues to go on. There's too much lockdown. There needs to be much more reopening. There needs to be much more focus on globalization. And we need to go back to personal responsibility, right? People say, oh, well, we need to prevent all these deaths from COVID. Well, okay, but 200,000 people have died of COVID, according to the statistics. Probably not exactly right, but we'll call it right. But 2 million people have died from other causes, and those people have been forced into isolation and to live their last, days or months in just horrifying circumstances. Can't see family members, and we don't think about the impact of our actions on other things. So 10 times as many people were impacted. And why do we care about one type of fatality but not others, right? Why don't we take driving, right? We could stop all traffic fatalities, outlaw driving, but that would be foolish, right? It's a personal choice to get in a car. I do it every day. I drive the 6 miles to work. Now, I have a chance that I could die on the way to work. There's a non-zero probability. It's not a high probability, so I choose to take that risk because I want to come to work. But we can legislate anything we want out of existence, right? We could legislate airline fatalities, just cancel all flights for the rest of mankind. That's silly.
Cigarettes are legal.
The what?
I said cigarettes are legal.
Exactly, right? And I think it's a much bigger issue. I think it has to do with command and control. My personal opinion is this was a test. This was a stress test on just how much government mandated control people would take. Because think about it, the word quarantine was invented, 400 plus years ago. What did it mean? Isolate the sick for 40 days. It says nothing about locking up healthy people. It says nothing about restricting activity of healthy people. It says isolate the sick. That's what we should do today. We should isolate the sick. We should have had COVID hospitals. Don't put sick people in with other healthy people and then get other people sick, right? Quarantining is a good idea. That's how you deal with, infectious disease. So we have this, I don't know, it's a very strange situation, but
you got a lot on your mind.
I do. And look, I think about this a lot because I have a lot of time to think because I spend a lot of time in the car.
Mark Yusko's State of the Union. Like, I mean, personally, I think the world is pretty weird right now, and I honestly don't think people have like a complete understanding of maybe just how bad it is, right? And I do think there's a bit of a lull that's like, my job isn't gone. It's gonna come back after this virus is gone. Well, what if another virus comes just a few months after that one, right?
Look, there will be guaranteed there'll be another virus and another virus and another virus. We've been dealing with viruses for thousands of years, and we're pretty good at it, actually. Herd immunity does actually work because the way it works is if no one has a virus and then some people get it, some people get sick, some people even pass, but most people get better. And then they have resistance, and then there are fewer people to infect. That's how R0 works. So what I think is really interesting about all of this is we deal with viral threats every single day, right? Tuberculosis kills more people than COVID by orders of magnitude. HIV/AIDS kills more people than COVID, okay? But we don't talk about those things. Pneumonia, influenza. All of a sudden, we're overreacting to a single viral threat as if it's something new that we've never seen. It's just not true. And so, yes, there will be other viruses. The real problem I see now is everyone's waiting for this vaccine. There's not going to be a vaccine.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying is it's like I feel like everyone thinks there's this trigger point in which it's just like the market's not that bad. It's just because of this blip in time.
Yeah.
And at some point, we were talking about it back in May, and I'm like, yo, you can keep people in your house for a month, 2 months, 3 months. But
Yeah.
if it goes 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, right? Like, it. But hey, let me pivot us off of this topic a little bit, and I kind of want to lead this in. So, I think I think it's hard to fight politicians,
Mhm.
right? Not impossible, but it takes a unified effort.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of corruption, like you said. I think there's a need for transparency. You and me, and maybe a lot of other people watching this might think that cryptocurrency or blockchain technology kind of lends towards those themes, right?
Mhm.
Independence, less reliance on people, transparency. Can you kind of give me your matchup? And I kind of want to lead into, kind of what have been the advancements between you think the crypto and the regular markets or traditional markets? But what do you think has happened in 2020? Like, what has been the accelerant in the what trends are you seeing in like the crypto market, the traditional markets, and maybe governments? And I'll throw a few things out there. So like I keep seeing this meme or thing, and it's like 2016, the institutions are coming into crypto. 2017,
Yeah.
2018, 2020, they're here. 2020, they took all the Bitcoin. So I think you see these advancements, MicroStrategy. I'm talking to a guy who is probably you're ahead of a lot of other people, and governments are now, I think, openly saying digital currencies, not cryptocurrency. There's a difference.
Different.
Right. So, what have you kind of seen the accelerant be in 2020? And I want to kind of lead that into maybe a little deeper conversation.
I think it's interesting in that the digital trends were well established before the whole, COVID lockdown impact. And those digital trends were a movement toward digital assets. So as we go from the analog world to the electronic world to ultimately the digital world, and we are well on our way that every asset in the world, right? Every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, every business, every piece of real estate, every piece of art, everything will eventually be digitized or tokenized and will be traded freely 24/7 on these decentralized exchanges. I mean, that's going to happen. And those trends have rapidly accelerated this year because people look, they're stuck at home. They got nothing to do. Yeah, I'll check it out. I'll download a wallet. I'll look at doing some reading on DeFi or whatever it is. And all of these trends are certainly being accelerated by the recent pull forward of digital activity, whether that's e-commerce turning to digital commerce or smart contract usage in terms of programmable money is an amazing innovation. If you think about it, right? We have programmable information or programmable logic or programmable commerce. I can now do things on my phone that I could never dream of doing 20 years ago. It was funny when I was first getting exposed to this business back in the 90s, and you wanted to download a single song, took 45 minutes. Now you would do that, right? Because you could set, start, you go to lunch, you come back, the song would be downloaded. Okay, great. Got my MP3. Problem was a full-length feature movie, 4 days. No one's waiting 4 days to wait for a digital movie. Today happens almost instantaneously, and you can stream it on your phone in HD. So technology caught up with the ideas. Take Chewy.com, right? Massive home run IPO. What do? They sell dog food online. Wait a minute, that was pets.com, right? The poster child for the blow up of the internet in 2000, pets.com. Horrible idea. No, it was a great idea. We just didn't have the bandwidth. We didn't have the adoption. And the same thing's true now is the early adopters of crypto have wallets, use the asset, use the store of value, have created ways to get capital out of the fiat system into this new crypto system, crypto capitalism system. And that adoption rate is increasing. And that is a good thing. And ultimately is going to lead us to a world where, again, everything, we start with currencies and commodities digital gold, cryptocurrencies. Then you've got this idea of digital currencies, as you said, not cryptocurrencies, but a digital currency. Now, people talk about, oh, once they have a digital currency, then crypto will be useless. No, it'd be exactly the same. A digital currency is just going from an electronic currency, which we have today. 92% of currency around the world is electronic. It's just ones and zeros. It's not physical coins or cash. Cash ultimately will disappear, right? We won't have physical coins or paper. We'll have electronic, ultimately digital currency. And there'll be digital dollar, digital renminbi, digital, ruble, and all these things.
Do you think that COVID was a spark at all for that? Like touching cash?
I actually don't. I think those were in the works. I mean, a year ago, we, Morgan Creek and Pomp and I, pushed lawmakers to try to, talk about a digital currency, because we knew that the Chinese were well down the path of a digital renminbi. And there's a reason. You talked about, why is the US so important? And why do we all have this US centric view? Well, the US dollar is 60% of global trade is denominated in dollars, even though only 8% of global trade is with the United States. But we did a good job throughout the 70s and 80s getting our currency out into the world to be the global reserve currency. Now, as that gets displaced by other currencies, imagine if you're in Venezuela and the peso, if you're in Venezuela and no, I can't remember the Venezuelan currency. Anyway, Bolivar. So the Bolivar is being absolutely smashed by the dictator at the top who's stealing all the wealth. And you want to get your money out. What do? Well, first you go on the street and you try to find dollars, literally try to find physical dollars. Well, if you couldn't find those, you discovered this, hey, there's Bitcoin thing. And you could transfer some of your Bolivars into Bitcoin and then they wouldn't get destroyed. Well, imagine a world where they could say, I could get renminbi. Ooh, interesting. And I could do it digitally on my computer. So that will displace some of the hegemony of the US dollar if China's first, or if Russia comes out, and people will have a choice on which currency they want to use. Ultimately, I think it will migrate to places like Bitcoin as a true cryptocurrency, a decentralized currency, which has huge advantages over centralized systems because it has a better monetary policy. But all of these trends have been accelerated by the response to COVID. Again, the COVID didn't do it. It was the response, the government responses, things like lockdowns and forcing people inside and forcing people online and forcing people, not to be able to consume in their normal way. So they find other ways to consume. And ultimately, self-sovereignty is going to be a big deal, right? If I can put my money in a bank and it's at risk that the bank can confiscate it if they get in trouble, why would I want to do that? Why wouldn't I want to put it in a different store of value where I can be my own bank? When you think about it, 40% of the world today doesn't have a bank account. So why not have a system using their mobile phone where they can be their own bank? And I think those systems are going to increasingly be adopted and are going to drive usage of, ultimately the innovation around crypto is not that rocket science, right? It's not that groundbreaking. Triple entry accounting is a big deal in the sense that we now for the first time don't need a trusted third party to do a transaction. I can send you value without you having to have a bank account, me having to have a bank account, paying Standard and Chartered because it goes across international border. I can now send you value across the internet, so money over internet protocol, and I can program it to operate in a certain way. Like I could say, Patrick only gets it if he fulfills this thing. So I could put it in a smart contract. And so all of these things help us with the globalization and the reduction of borders and nation states. And I think will reverse some of the damage that's been done by this, coming back into a more nationalistic and a more.
So, sorry, you're making me think. So what is? It seems like there's some appeal for the rules not to be reset, right? So there is the rules of Bitcoin, and no one can change them. it took some time for these guys to get in. So like MicroStrategy, and I'm just the ones from the last few weeks where
Yeah.
company treasuries are buying Bitcoin Square. Obviously this is happening. A lot of people watching this probably know about that. This isn't breaking news, but if they start saying we value this and we'll dump money into it, do you think that the governments really try, like, if 2020 was an accelerant of a year, and I guess what, and to highlighting your point a little more, like you're saying that the technological innovations of Bitcoin aren't that great, which whatever people could debate. There was a lot of individual components that were actually glued together, right? But I understand, take your point very clearly. Like it wasn't impossible, right? It was more that there was a window of opening. It's almost more public sentiment and marketing, right? And
Oh,
timing.
100%. Look, the guy who should get a lot of credit, Tim May, God rest his soul, just passed away last year. He wrote the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto in 1988, and he outlined everything that was going to happen. He outlined how governments were going to fight it. He outlined how corporations were going to fight it. He said all the things that had to happen to solve the double spend problem. But the problem is, when you're an anarchist, you have no friends, right? You sit up in the mountains with your guns,
It's a
and
bad label.
you don't influence anybody. And it took Satoshi-san, whoever he, she, they are, to popularize and to get adoption incrementally at first, right? Unless you were running drugs on Silk Road or you're a cryptography student, you really didn't get it in 2008 or 9. But then as 2010 and 11, a few college kids saw it, and then a few others, and then the government cracked down on Silk Road and suddenly popularized it. And people like Tim, one of my favorite stories is Tim Draper. His son says, "Hey, Dad, I need $40." He's like, "What do you need $40 for?" He says, "I got to buy a sword." He says, "Adam, your mom's not going to let you have a sword. What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, I don't want a real sword. I want a digital sword, for my game." He's like, "I'm not giving you real money to put into your computer." And then the light bulb went off. He's like, "Holy shit. Wow." And he bought all of the Bitcoin from the auction. It was $3. Everybody was trying to bid $1.50, $1.60. He's like, $3.01 sold. And so, worth a couple billion now. So pretty smart. But the key is that light bulb went off, that the innovation, and I'm not trying to diminish the innovation of Bitcoin. It is amazing and it's world changing. That's not my point. I'm just saying that the technology of triple entry accounting is really not that hard to envision or imagine. That was tough to actually make happen, but the miracle was not the innovation. The miracle was the adoption. There have been plenty of great ideas that never reached critical mass. They never reached the network effect or the Lindy effect, right? That's what makes this so cool. Is the miracle of Bitcoin was not that it's almost $12,000 as we sit here talking. The miracle is that it went from 0.003 cents to $1. That's the miracle, that it didn't die. And I have this thing I just tweeted out last night. We're going to need a bigger headstone. So it says RIP Bitcoin, 2010, 2011, scratched out, 2012, scratched out, and it's at 2019, scratched out, and the headstone's full. So we're going to need a bigger, because people said it's dead every single year for the past 11 years, 382 times, I think. There have been, physical stories about the death of Bitcoin. It's not going to die. And so the adoption follows Metcalfe's law. The adoption follows companies like Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy who say, wait a minute, I have an asset. It's denominated in fiat, and I can choose to diversify that asset into other currencies. I can put some in euro. I can put some in yen. I can put some in gold as a currency. Or I can put it in this new currency. And he has a great line. He has a bunch of great lines. It's like, now my new brother from another mother, best friend, even though we've never met. He has this great line, which I've talked about for a long time, which is everything we do every day, right? What you and I are doing right now is converting energy into value. Well, hopefully people find value. but we fueled up, right? We have energy in our body and we are converting that into value. And then we store that value in the form of this video and this audio. And that value can then be transferred and shared and hopefully fuel more creation of value through that conversion of energy to value. Same thing is true of when we take hydrocarbons out of the ground and burn them and produce electricity, which produces light, which allows us to work, which allows us to transact, which allows us to build, or a manufacturing plant. It's all about conversion of energy to value. Bitcoin is the perfect manifestation of the conversion of energy. We take energy and we turn it into a storable form of value. Awesome. I mean, on my trip, I drove through middle of Texas and they're flaring nat gas, right? They don't have any pipeline, so they just flare it. They burn it. That's bad for the environment. It's a waste of valuable energy. So why not put a microturbine there with a server and turn that heat energy into electricity, turn it into Bitcoin, which then can be transferred over the internet to anywhere in the world, and you turn energy into value. And every time we have innovation that allows more energy to be turned into value and then that value to be stored and shared, the better off we are. And here's the coolest part. Then by having an asset like Bitcoin that allows us to move our stored energy into value, that frees up us, okay, human beings, to be more creative, to be more innovative, to unlock future potential, to dream big ideas, to have the idea that Jeff Bezos has that says, or Bezos, that we're going to, transact things on the internet back when people didn't even know what the internet was. That's cool stuff. And that's going to continue to accelerate. And that's why people say, oh, Mark, you're such a bear. I'm not bearish at all. I am wildly bullish. I just happen to be wildly bullish on stuff that most people don't want to talk about. And I happen to be bearish on overvalued assets like, common stocks in the United States, or, government bonds, or places where fiat is going to destroy the absolute value of those assets. Nominally, those assets will probably appreciate, but in real terms, denominated in dollars, denominated in gold or Bitcoin, as opposed to denominated in dollars, the value is going to go down.
And you would say that, you think Bitcoin is the answer, or some form of cryptocurrency? Maybe it's not exactly Bitcoin, but
no, it's Bitcoin. It's definitely Bitcoin, and there will be others. But
so you think this plays a huge role in humanity?
Huge, monster role in humanity. Bitcoin changes currency for the better. Currency today, fiat currency, which has an inflationary monetary policy, meaning you create more of it to devalue. Think about this. When I was growing up, I paid, or my dad paid, 31 cents for a gallon of gas. So visiting my daughter in California, I grew up in Seattle, so on the West Coast again, I paid $4.31 for a gallon of gas. It's the same gallon of gas. It does the exact same thing. In fact, it's a little less good because it has ethanol in it, so it doesn't burn quite as hot. Produces the same amount of energy. Again, energy to value. So what's the value? I turn that energy into gasoline, I put in my fuel, and I'm be able to move my body from one place to another in a car to create value, whether that's value of relationship, whether that's value of doing a job, whatever it is, that's the creation or conversion of energy to value. But the problem is the value isn't different. It's the price of that value is different, in that we devalued the currency over the last 100 years. Since 1913 to today, a dollar has turned into a nickel. So we took a paper dollar and turned it into a coin, a nickel, because we've taken the purchasing power away through inflation. That's a bad monetary policy. Bitcoin reverses that and turns currency into a saving asset, into an investing asset. Fiat is a spending asset. It's a consumable asset. And if you don't consume it today, it will be worth less tomorrow. And that encourages consumption, which is why American economy is 70% consumption. And that doesn't encourage innovation and wealth creation. Now, we've had plenty of that because there are some smart, motivated people, don't get me wrong, but Bitcoin changes the relationship of how we think about money and its role as a store of value and as a motivator for creativity and intellectual prosperity.
All right. So you're a champion of this. Now on that leads to my next question. I know we're running a little over here. But okay, so you believe it, and I think we were hitting earlier on like what was that, like maybe it wasn't it was not like complete rocket science of the Bitcoin code. It was maybe certain things glued together. Maybe timing was right. Maybe marketing was right. Whether that was intentional or not could probably be debated. Then I think like one thing that's always intrigued me about the story of Bitcoin or crypto is that it really took people to do heavy lifting. I think whether they were reimbursed or not, like there was a lot of, I don't call them internal champions, but like I guess external
Yeah.
champions from the core, right? That really had to take it and run with it. You know, I think even people ask me like why we do this event, and I'm like, I don't know, this is just cool. Like I like Bitcoin, it's been good to me, right? Or why I do this at universities, I'm like, I don't know, maybe something cool will happen out of it. But like I feel like, at least for me, and I feel like you might a little bit, and I think many people do, but my question to you is like what do you view your role as in the space? And like what's
Hmm.
your strategy? And like how do you really view, right? And obviously you're early here, so you have ability to put your money where your mouth is, or your
Yep.
clients' money where your mouth is.
Yep.
You have the ability to put your reputation on the line. All of these things are neither cheap to wallets or sometimes to pride or legacy if they go wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you kind of view your positioning here?
Yeah. It's a really great question, very insightful question, and one that I have contemplated often and have been confronted often. I hear a lot, from people I know, people I care about, relationships I have, who say, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you risking your reputation on this, crazy thing for drug dealers and terrorists? Or, why would you waste your time on this, silly little invention and, go back to traditional investing?" And it's interesting. Throughout my career, I have this school of thought, I guess, that if you feel really good about something when you make an investment, if you feel really good, you're going to lose money. And if you feel a little sick to your stomach when you pull the trigger, you're going to make money. If you feel really sick to your stomach, you're going to make a lot of money. Because ultimately, if you do what everyone else is doing, which is why you feel good, if you do what the herd is doing, it's already in the price, right? You're not going to make a lot. And if you do something that makes you uncomfortable, right? You buy an asset, that's really cheap, or you buy an asset that's misunderstood, people are going to ridicule you. And in fact, it's my pinned tweet, right? People see my pinned tweet is the greatest wealth is created by investing in something that you believe in before others even understand. And that non-traditional or non-consensus belief will cause ridicule, but it'll be worth it. And it always is. And so you asked the question, how do I view my role? I actually never viewed my role. I would say my life is a series of happy accidents. Others would say, oh, divine intervention. How did you meet this person and get this job? Or how did you find this company? Or, I didn't plan to be here. And I was pretty stupid, right? We've talked about this in the past, right? I got introduced to this in 2013 by Dan Moorhead. I didn't get it. I was not a cryptography student. I was not running drugs on Silk Road. I didn't get it. But I got the idea that Bitcoin. I didn't get Bitcoin 2013. I got infrastructure. I got picks and shovels. I got that this was a technological innovation. I had my eureka moment that blockchain technology is the operating system for the Internet of Value, that everything that we do has migrated from platform to platform, from mainframe computers to microcomputers to personal computers to handheld supercomputers to the internet to the mobile net to now ultimately the trust net, where everything in the world will be interconnected and everything of value will be traded over IP. And once I had that realization, I was like, okay, now I'm going to focus on this. But we had clients say they'd fire us. We had people say, you're an idiot. How do I view my role is, for better or for worse, I'm okay at storytelling. So I view my role as a storyteller. I think I have been willing to, as I say, hang out with the bad guys. Every innovation in history starts at the fringe. right? Think about pagers. We've talked about this, right? Pagers, who are they used by? Drug dealers. What about the internet, porn industry? Okay, it always starts at the fringe because the fringe is barred from traditional, right? If you run a cannabis business today, you can't have a bank account. So what do? You use crypto. Logical. Why not? Doesn't mean the people who are doing cannabis is bad. I mean, we have way worse drugs that are legal. And in fact, lobbyists pay to get people on them so they can get addicted. And then 50,000 people could die every year from opioids. Soapbox I won't get on, but one of my big things, having lost two friends, children to opioid addiction. So horrible, right? Versus cannabis. Look, I'm not a big cannabis fan, but way worse. I mean, way less bad than opioids. And yet we make opioids totally available and we won't let people who want to run a dispensary have a bank account. Ridiculous. So the government setting those rules will try to impede progress. And so my role, I think, is to disseminate facts instead of FUD. I'm a FUD fighter, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I try to, keep through writing or doing these types of events or speaking or investing, putting my money where my mouth is. I feel like we have a job to do of helping people with our hashtag, right? Our hashtag is #GetOffZero. And when we look back in 10 years and 20 years and 5 years, even having no exposure to digital assets, in Bitcoin in particular, having no exposure will be wrong. It'll be wrong economically. It'll be wrong as a fiduciary. It'll be wrong in every way, but we won't know that it's wrong until we have the benefit of hindsight. And when the masses, when the herd are saying it's good. Today, you have to be a little bit.
People will be getting sued for malfeasance later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For not being a good fiduciary. And so today, I look at it as a little bit of a spokesman for the asset because I come from the traditional world. I got, white hair, so people, trust me a little bit. And I have some experience with other innovations. And we've been very successful partnering with people over the years who were really good at getting in the way of innovation, right? We invested money with Sequoia back in 90s and did this little thing called Google. That turned out okay. And we've invested in the mobile net. We've invested in infrastructure around cellular telephony. And we've invested in infrastructure around basically every innovation that's happened over the last 30 years of my career. And again, it's not me. I'm not the genius, but I am pretty decent at finding people who are really smart about certain sectors and then getting capital to them and letting them innovate and ultimately create wealth.
Well, I was even going to say, and I think sometimes I hear people describe you, I think you and Pomp and the public are kind of like, at least in the crypto small bubble we live in, are kind of like bound together a little bit, right? Or in conversation. So, I think obviously like he has a bit of a cult following or whatever.
Yep.
And do you kind of see that, is that how you're trying to kind of position what you're doing on Morgan Creek, like kind of become like, or do you feel like that a requirement to move this market forward is to have a voice in the mainstream, and that like you kind of need to maintain the element of like being cool or in touch? Cool is a bad word. I hate saying that. But
no, look, I'm definitely not cool, and Pomp's the cool one.
You're cool. You're cool, but I'm just saying, like, from a business structure, and say there's 20 other things, right? As you look forward, because I really do think that uniquely, because Bitcoin doesn't really have a president, right? And even what you're saying about like, you guys are lobbying Congress a little bit, right, during the digital R&D or whatever, right? Like, so I'm not just saying like on crypto Twitter, but do you also like feel that maybe some of your role is to educate your peers in the space, et cetera?
100%. And look, Pomp has done an amazing job building a platform and a megaphone to get the message out. And that's one of the reasons I partnered with him 3 years ago, because I saw the talent that he had for communication, and I'm a good communicator as well in a different way. I mean, I'm not as facile with Twitter as he is. I've become okay at it. I don't do enough podcasting, although I do a decent amount, and I do stuff like this. So I do think that our role at Morgan Creek and Morgan Creek Digital is to help educate, to help spread the word, to help popularize this idea that this is inevitable, that this is a technological evolution. It's not revolutionary. It's not scary. It's not anarchist. It is about the evolution of computing power. It is a natural migration from the old days of mainframes and client server to a connected world where every system, every computing system must have an operating system. And we've had, operating systems forever. And blockchain is just the operating system for the internet of value, or what I call the trust net. And Bitcoin is the first manifestation or the first use case of that technology that was able to survive through the network effect, this emergence as a go-to technology. And everyone says, oh, but it's not the best technology. You don't need to be the best. Paul Romer won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago for this exact point. The law of increasing returns says you don't need to be the best. You need to be the most popular, the most utilized, the biggest network effect. And that's over, right? And it doesn't mean there won't be other cryptocurrencies that are important. There will be. It doesn't mean there won't be other blockchain projects that are important. There will be. But as far as the currency, okay, it's Bitcoin. And that doesn't mean Ethereum's less good or less valuable. Ethereum's a totally different thing. And it's like the internet. Think about it. The internet has 5 protocols, right? It used to have 80 or 90. Today it has 5. And they're all different, right? TCP/IP is the operating system. It's the backbone of the internet. FTP allows you to transfer files. SMTP, HTTP, websites, and email. And then there's www, which is basically a system for building other things on the internet, like web pages and blogs or whatever it happens to be. It's a tool. Same thing with Ethereum. Ethereum is a tool to program logic on this internet of everything. And they can coexist, and they can even be symbiotic in their relationship. And this whole maximalist argument back and forth is just nonsense, right? Let's do the best for each technological innovation, utilize it for what it is, recognize it for what it is, and support it and champion it for what it is, and not get in the pissing match over which one's better. This whole DeFi problem. People are like, oh, DeFi is bad. No, there are bad people doing some bad things in DeFi, no question. Just like there were some bad people that did some bad things in ICOs. That doesn't mean the idea of tokenization is bad. It doesn't mean the idea of decentralized finance is bad. Decentralized finance is going to change the world. Absolutely going to change derivative markets, going to change structured finance markets, going to change traditional markets. All of that is going to be decentralized. All of it's going to be awesome. But are there going to be people along the way that do bad stuff? Of course, right? Penny stock scams, traditional stock scams, mutual fund scams, ETF scams. They're all, wherever there's money, there will be scams.
Bad guys everywhere. They're not disappearing.
Yep.
Well, hey, I know I'm keeping you a little long. I'll let you take us out. My last question, easy one. Just because I see how much you just jumped at the point of wearing the sombrero. What are you going to be for Halloween? Are you going to? I know you have a 9-year-old.
It's such a great question. So, our neighborhood, the parents do dress up. Some go way, way out. I usually don't go way out. So I have a couple go-to. Some years I'm the alpha hunter. So I put on my blaze vest and my cap and although I can't carry around a play gun anymore because people freak out.
Like safari guy?
Well, it's more like a duck hunter or whatever, or a deer hunter. But I talk about being the alpha hunter. So I'm out, searching for alphas since I'm in the investment business. I've done that. I actually did that on CNBC once. That was pretty fun. Where I was in full uniform on Halloween and, or full costume, I guess. I've also done the cowboy thing. I lived in Houston for a while. So I still have my cowboy hat and boots, and I pull out the duster. And again, I used to carry a rifle, but now I can't do that anymore because people freak out. But a couple times I've done the matchy match thing with my little guy, either as a soccer player, a football player, since he is bilingual now, so he says football. I think this year he's going as Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. So I guess I could go way out there and do one of the villains from Into the Spider-Verse. I'll have to think about that one. But I could just go as Ludicolo. I kind of like the sombrero look. So,
I forget all the bad guys.
Given how much Pokemon Go I have played in the last 3 months with my little guy, I probably should go as something Pokemon related. So
I like it. Well, hey, let me take us out here. It was very nice talking to you. Any last words before we go?
No, look, I always appreciate the conversation. I appreciate how much work you do to get ready for the interviews and how you lead the conversation. I love how you bring us back to the main points that people want to hear about on the Reimagine series, and really excited to be part of the event. And don't make the mistake of excluding me next time. Just kidding around.
Yeah. I actually thought about that after.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding around. You know me. I like doing this stuff, and so it's so funny. When I first got my first media coaching, they'd ask me a question and I'd answer it. And they said, what are you doing? Like, well, I'm answering the question. No, you never answer the question. You deflect and redirect and then talk about something you want to talk about. But I don't do that, right? You ask me a question about DeFi, I'll give you an opinion about DeFi. You ask me a question about, crypto, I'll give you an answer about crypto. You ask me a question about, Indonesia or Malaysia or Thailand or Bali, I'll give you, answer about that. So I probably should be better at the whole deflect and redirect thing, but I'm pretty much an open book, and kind of you get what you see.
You're pretty good at it. We're starting to actually open up for the first time now. This is getting pretty big. Letting other people host interviews. We're gonna be joining with them. So next time you could pick one, or if you wanna talk with someone, invite them. And
I like that idea. Yeah, let's do that.
We'll let you narrate one. But Mark, thank you as always. Third time that we've had him. I don't think it's gonna be the last time. Everybody watching, let's keep this going. It's Halloween. Patrick McLain, Mark Yusko. See you guys later.
All right. Happy Halloween.